Picture Marcelo Bielsa, one of the most respected football minds on the entire planet, a two-time World Cup winning nation now sitting under his command, and in the closing minutes of a match that should never have been close, he is standing on the touchline, completely still, watching 8 minutes of stoppage time tick away that he cannot control. On the other side of the pitch, dancing, defending like their lives depend on it, celebrating every single clearance like it was a goal. A team from 10 tiny islands scattered across the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. A nation of just over 500,000 people, smaller than the city of Bristol, taking points off a country that has won this entire tournament twice in its history. This is the image of the 2026 World Cup, and it is FIFA's absolute worst nightmare. Because FIFA did this to themselves. To understand why this is happening, you have to go back to why these tiny nations are even at this tournament in the first place. Because that is where the irony of this entire story begins. FIFA expanded this World Cup from 32 teams to 48, 12 groups of 4, 104 matches instead of 64. And the reason was never romance. It was never really about growing the game for its own sake. It was money. More teams means more matches. More matches means more broadcast deals, more tickets sold, more sponsorship inventory, more of everything that fills FIFA's accounts. The expansion was sold to the world as a gift, as football finally becoming truly global, opening the door to nations who had never been given a real shot. Places like Cape Verde, places like Curaçao. But here's the part FIFA will never say out loud. They never actually expected these small teams to do anything once they arrived. The quiet business logic was simple. Let the minnows show up. Sell the feel-good story for a news cycle or two. Let them get comfortably beaten by the big nations. Fill out the bracket. And then let them politely exit the tournament so that the real value, the giants, the nations with massive television audiences and deep, bankable football markets, could march on toward the rounds where the actual money lives. A Spain versus Brazil quarterfinal is worth a fortune in broadcast rights. A Cape Verde versus Curaçao knockout tie was never supposed to exist. More games for the money. Then the giants go deep for the bigger money. That was the entire plan. The plan lasted about 90 minutes. On day one of this tournament, Cape Verde, nicknamed the Blue Sharks, playing their first ever World Cup match in the history of their nation, walked out against Spain, the reigning European champions. The team that pundits and even artificial intelligence prediction models had picked to win this entire World Cup. A squad stacked with players from Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Manchester City. Cape Verde, powered by their goalkeeper, 40 years old, making save after save, held Spain to a scoreless draw. Spain simply could not break down a team ranked nowhere near them, playing their tournament debut. The world shrugged it off. Spanish rustiness, people said. Early tournament jitters. They will fade once the real competition begins. Then came Game 2. And the fluke theory died completely. Cape Verde's second match was against Uruguay, two-time World Cup champions, 15-time Copa America winners. A squad featuring players from Real Madrid, Manchester United, and Tottenham. This time, Cape Verde did not sit back and hope to survive. They went for the throat. 20 minutes into the match, midfielder Kevin Pena stepped up to a free kick, 34 yards from goal. The Uruguayan defensive wall inexplicably split. His shot screamed through the gap and into the bottom corner, past Uruguay's veteran goalkeeper Fernando Muslera. Cape Verde's first ever goal in World Cup history, and they were leading. Against Uruguay. Somewhere in the stands in Miami, the goalkeeper's own mother, who had reportedly feared she could not even afford the visa to travel and watch her son play, watched her country's national team take the lead against the aristocracy of world football. On the touchline, Cape Verde's head coach, a man known simply as Bubista, dressed casually, nothing like the tailored intensity of his counterpart, was out coaching Marcelo Bielsa in real time. Uruguay responded. Maxi Araujo and Agustín Canobio scored either side of halftime to put Uruguay ahead 2-1. And for a moment, it looked like the natural order of football was about to reassert itself. Cape Verde refused to read that script. Just after the hour mark, off another defensive mistake from Uruguay's veteran goalkeeper, substitute Elio Varela steered home the equalizer. His first ever goal for his country. He turned and led his teammates in a celebration dance while Bielsa stood frozen on the touchline. 2-2. With 8 minutes of stoppage time still to survive, and it was Cape Verde finishing the stronger of the two sides. Bielsa, afterward, could only admit that his own team had been, in his words, disorganized, and that Uruguay, being the stronger squad, now had to actually be demonstrated on the pitch, rather than assumed. a two-time world champion nation facing genuine pressure in their group. And a country of 500,000 people did that to them. So who actually are these players wearing the Cape Verde shirt? Cape Verde is an archipelago of 10 islands roughly 600 kilometers off the West African coast. Population, just over 500,000 people. There is a diaspora of roughly the same size living across the United States, which conveniently is exactly where their group matches are being played. They qualified the hard way. They opened their campaign with a draw against Angola, were demolished 4-1 by Cameroon, and then won 7 of their final 8 qualifying matches to finish above Cameroon, 5-time African champions, at the top of their group. Their squad is a beautiful patchwork of the diaspora, 26 players drawn from 25 different clubs across 14 different countries. More of their players were born in Rotterdam than in their own capital city. And now, after 2 matches, a single result against Saudi Arabia would send Cape Verde into the knockout rounds of a World Cup their nation had never even reached before. The story shifted, match by match, from nice that they are here to can they actually survive the group to, increasingly undeniably, wait, how far can these guys actually go? And Cape Verde is not even the only nightmare FIFA is dealing with right now, because the other half of this story belongs to a team with the exact opposite arc, Curaçao, a Caribbean island of roughly 156,000 people off the coast of Venezuela, the smallest nation by both population and land area ever to qualify for a men's World Cup in the tournament's 96-year history. To put that in perspective, the stadium hosting this tournament's final holds more than half of Curaçao's entire population. In their opening match, Curaçao were annihilated. Germany beat them 7-1. For one afternoon, that result was every critic's dream headline. The 48-team format is a farce, they said. These nations do not belong here. The World Cup is being diluted for money. Then, 6 days later, Curaçao went out and held Ecuador, a team packed with players from Arsenal and Paris Saint-Germain in defense, to a scoreless draw. The hero of that match was goalkeeper Eloy Room, 37 years old, a man who had spent much of his career on the bench rather than the pitch. He made save after save that night, a tournament-defining performance. The King and Queen of the Netherlands, Curaçao's former colonial ruler, with deep cultural ties to the island, reportedly watched from the stands. Curaçao's head coach, the oldest manager at this entire World Cup, was visibly emotional at the final whistle, saying simply that his players had come from nothing and fought like lions. One commentator summed up the absurdity of the entire situation perfectly. A boulder in the sea has a point at the World Cup. Here is the contrast that is genuinely torturing FIFA right now. Cape Verde, the fearless debutantes who look, increasingly, like they actually belong on this stage. Curaçao, the tiny nation that got humiliated in their opening match and simply refused to disappear afterward. 2 completely different stories, both arriving at the exact same conclusion. These small nations are not just filling space in the bracket the way they were designed to. They are stealing points. They are damaging reputations. They are crashing directly into the knockout stage conversation that was never supposed to include them. And the format FIFA built, purely for profit, is exactly what is making all of this possible. In this 48-team structure, the top 2 teams from each group advance automatically, plus the 8 best third-place teams across the entire tournament, which means an underdog nation does not even need to win their group or finish second to survive into the knockout rounds. 1 shock draw, 1 disciplined defensive performance, 1 heroic night from a goalkeeper nobody outside their own country had ever heard of, and suddenly, you are in the bracket. FIFA built a tournament with more doors than this competition has ever had, and the smallest nations in the field are walking straight through every single one of them. This is the controversy that FIFA never saw coming. They expanded this tournament for money, on the quiet assumption that the giants would go deep, and the small nations would go home early and gracefully. Instead, look at who is actually in real trouble right now. Belgium, a golden generation now staring down an early exit. Uruguay, 2-time world champions, in genuine jeopardy of an embarrassing group stage finish. And it is the islands that are climbing. FIFA wanted giants advancing deep into this tournament. What they are getting instead are giant killers. That is the actual nightmare. Not that the expanded format failed, that it worked too well, for exactly the wrong nations. Every single round that one of these tiny countries survives is a round in which a bigger, richer, far more commercially valuable nation goes home instead. And honestly, after everything else surrounding this World Cup, the visa chaos, the empty seats in certain venues, the ticket pricing controversies, the underdogs might be the one genuinely, purely joyful thing that FIFA has accidentally created. History tells you exactly why moments like this matter so much. This is the most exclusive trophy in all of global sport. In 96 years of this tournament, only 8 nations have ever won it. Only 13 nations have ever even reached a final. The Giants almost always win in the end. That has never really changed, and it probably never will. But the underdog run, the impossible run, the one nobody predicted, is the soul of the entire competition. Costa Rica in 2014 dropped into a group with 3 former world champions, Uruguay, Italy, and England, and topped it, sending both Italy and England home in the process. Morocco in 2022, becoming the first African and Arab nation ever to reach a World Cup semi-final, knocking out Spain, Portugal, and Belgium along the way. South Korea reaching the semi-finals in 2002 on home soil. Croatia, a country of barely 4 million people, reaching 1 World Cup final and 1 World Cup semi-final within the space of 4 years. These runs are the reason this tournament is, genuinely, the greatest show on earth. So let's put the entire irony of this story together. FIFA built a bigger World Cup specifically to extract more money out of the world's footballing giants. And in doing so, they accidentally constructed the greatest stage for giant killers this tournament has ever produced. The exact nations they expected to quietly fill space and politely leave are the ones currently stealing the show, and, quite possibly, stealing knockout stage places that were never supposed to be available to them. Cape Verde, 500,000 people, are within touching distance of the round of 32 of a World Cup. Curaçao, a boulder in the Caribbean Sea, have a point on the board and a goalkeeper who is, only half-jokingly, asking his own country for a statue. And with every single step forward these nations take, a bigger, glossier, more commercially profitable country packs its bags and flies home instead. That is FIFA's worst nightmare, and it might just be the single best thing about this entire World Cup. So tell me, who is your underdog in this tournament? Are you riding with the Blue Sharks all the way into the knockout rounds? Or do you think the Giants finally claw their position back before the group stage ends? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe to When Football Speaks if you want World Cup coverage that roots for the smallest team on the pitch and still follows every story all the way to the truth behind it. I will see you in the next one.